do so, especially in key components going forward. So, yeah, we'll see how the AFC West shakes out. Obviously, we'll share our get a better idea how we both feel about it. I think once again last year we were both pretty much. It wasn't a hot take. I think we both had the Chiefs winning the division. So I'm pretty sure we'll see. I don't think he'll shake it up, but we'll see what happens. In a couple of weeks when we share our predictions. But anyhow, those are our thoughts on the AFC West and their offseason moves and how it will affect them into the season. Now let's move on to a little bit more of a fun topic, and to wrap it up, and it is our top 10 quarterback rankings heading into the 2024 season. I know I usually make you go first, John. I'll give you the choice still. Do you want to do all 10 or do 5 and 5 and like kind of back and forth? Obviously, we're going to start at 10.
Let's do 5 and 5.
Okay, because I think it'll create an interesting. Okay, all right. Well, I'll go first because I always make you go first for these. And I don't know. I'm just seeing John's right now, but it's very interesting, and we'll obviously share our reasoning. So we get some fresh reactions. So I'll go first. Like I mentioned, starting at 10. And obviously, there's going to be a bunch of guys OLI left off the list. And this one was tough because I feel like for here was kind of like if I had ranked tiers, this was like this last guy is like the tier before the next one. But it's for me at number 10 is Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions, and this is big for me to say because I usually have kind of been down on Jared Goff, but I do have to give him his flowers, especially for the year he had last year. I know we talk about how the line, does help in that their running game, is their main identity, but we saw last year, and let's be honest, even the years with Sean McVay, yes, he had some favorable offensive systems, but for the most part, he dialed in on them, and he is capable of making some off-script plays. He's not terrible, out of the pocket. He can move. It's one of the reasons why he was drafted number 1 overall, or was he 1 or 2? I forget, but he's a top. He's 1. I'm sorry, I'm remembering now. And it does have a quick release, and hey, helps that he plays in Detroit. Yes, the outdoor factor that I factor in with his small hands is not that big of a factor because he gets to play indoors for most of the year, nonetheless, though, for the most part, he's going to hit the plays you draw up, can occasionally make some off-schedule plays, has a solid arm, kind of a quickish release, and like I said, he can make a couple of off-platform throws. Is he going to be the strongest? No. Is he going to be the biggest in the pocket? No. Is he going to, but for number 10, I feel like he's respectable there, and yeah, it was just a good year for him. And I'm interested to see if he can keep building off of it and kind of shutting me up because once again, I was a hater per se or down on Jared Goff pretty much throughout the whole way. So he is at number 10 for me. At number 9 is where I have Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. I feel like it's where I get some Eagles fans hating, but this is about the range he was last year. I think it's a couple spots down. I think we saw last year more of what I'm going to give you your flowers, John. What you were concerned about Jalen Hurts was, okay, can the intermediate stuff, the timing throws, when it's not just, boom, play action, and I got A.J. Brown one-on-one on the outside, and I can just throw a great 50-50 ball, which he's really great at. And obviously we know he's great with the ball in his hands, extending plays or just tucking it and running. But we saw a bit last year when their offense was more simple. It was a lot tougher for him to manufacture consistent offense outside of some of the backyard stuff or the shot plays or just the Eagles being a better talent, skill position wise, etc. There. So nonetheless, maybe in an offseason of him reconfiguring with Sirianni can help him, get back to what he was maybe more 2 years ago too, and just address some of the concerns that we mentioned. That can he make the intermediate throws and be better with anticipation as opposed to kind of just trying to be a lot like a Josh Allen per se, because one of the reasons why he is one of the leading I think he was definitely leading in turnovers or one of the top turnover quarterbacks last year if I remember correctly, but nonetheless a little bit of down here for Jalen Hurts. We know he's got all the talent in the world. We just got to kind of see it progress further, especially if him and the Eagles want to take the next step, especially now that, and we'll talk about them another pod, but now that the roster as a whole starting to lose some of their top end talent. So he's at number 9 for me. And at number 8, I know he was a rookie, but I mean, I really don't try to hold that stuff too much in account. I got to take for the year he did into account, and that is C.J. Stroud out of the Houston Texans. Unlike one reason why I'm putting him above Hurts, can make every throw, short, intermediate, deep. We saw him, have great show off his arm strength last year, and even like his fast, quick releases and multiple releases. It doesn't always have to be the same release. He can do it on the run, outside of the pocket, and I mean, nothing but wow from C.J. Stroud, and that was with a constantly shuffling offensive line last year. And honestly, like he could, I really wanted to put him higher in this list, and he could be, a couple spots higher. It was really tough, but it really is just for him. I just got to keep seeing it more and more, in more situations, obviously. But great start for C.J. Stroud. Once again, like I said, talent is undeniable, and there's a very good reason why he had. He has many others, even the Bryce Young supporters questioning, hey, maybe we oversaw something last year, but hopefully he can keep building off that. I mean, Houston obviously believes that as they're going all in with him, which we'll talk about once again another episode. But I have C.J. Stroud at 8. At number 7 is where I am going with Justin Herbert out of the LA Chargers. And once again, this is like, at this point, we're getting real nitpicky. I mean, there was just really for Herbert, I would like to see a little bit more of some backyard football ability, and when the play breaks down, can he extend with his legs? We know he's physically capable of doing it, but oftentimes, he tries too much often to be a little patient in the pocket, and I would like him to be a little bit more, free forming per se at times. And I will say too, there was times where he missed some throws last year, and granted, he's usually dinged up, and so maybe that's something he's got to be better about. But we saw, I remember early in the year, there's a couple times where he missed Keenan Allen on some kind of gimme plays. And granted, it just could be, I've talked more too, where the offense just wasn't really great for him to begin with. We talked about how, I mean, I know you definitely weren't a fan of the Kellen Moore offense, and then we already know how lack of wide receiver talent there was anyway, and lack of run game and such. So we'll see if this whole new mindset, new coaching regime can boost Justin Herbert back up. I certainly, once again, he's at 7, but he is definitely like a top 5 talent. It's just, like I said, I'm nitpicking going off, especially off last year. But nonetheless, Herbert's still awesome, still amazing, still, a huge tower in that pocket and can make any throw on the field necessary. Oh, and one other thing too, and this is where I struggle with him and Stroud, because I feel like Stroud was a touch better with his touch passes and throwing with anticipation. Well, I feel like Herbert sometimes has like the early years, like Josh Allen used to do it too, where I'm gonna try to laser this ball in every time, where something you can take some power off it and throw some touch and drop it in the bucket every now and then. But just a little nitpicky, and their offense wasn't really built for that. Lastly, to round out my first 5, at number 6, I got your quarterback, Dak Prescott. Once again, if we're gonna compare and contrast, I felt Dak was one of the reasons why your Cowboys kind of found their stride offensively last year, especially with really only CeeDee Lamb to go off of. Not that CeeDee's bad, but a lot is put on Dak and that offense to be the main conductor. I think he kind of showed, if you could look back at the games, their offense obviously went as he did. And for the most part, Dak delivered. As for as much criticism he gets, he delivered. Those things I talk about, capable to make every throw within the pocket. And we see he's still really good at making those backyard plays, extended plays with his leg to throw, or just tucking it running. Honestly, like I hear him in terms of him wanting an extension in his money, because for year in year out, for as much criticism he gets, I think that's just because he has the star on the helmet and he plays for Dallas. He's been really good, and he's done everything they've asked in terms of offense, production, and such. So he may not be as amazing as some of the top 5 guys, but nonetheless gets the job done. And I just gotta give him his flowers, and that's why he's at 6, because I think, once again, blank slate, you can almost put him in any offense, and the Dak will have success. So those are my first 5, John. I'm going to throw it over to you so we can hear your 10 through 6. Or unless you have any comments or criticisms before you hop into yours.
No comments or criticisms. I agree with the logic for the most part on all of them, and you'll hear that in some of my list. I do think we have, after I say mine, I think we can kind of reconvene over the 5 because, we do have some differences. First off, I'm sharing it on my screen, but I'm going to send it to you just so you can see it. At number 10, I do have Jalen Hurts. I sent it on Messenger. I do have Jalen Hurts, and this is his passing chart from last year. And you can see that obviously some of the concerns were he struggled a little bit over the middle. You can tell that by like the intermediate and deep between the numbers, where 1 touchdown, 4 picks, then 2 touchdowns, 3 picks deep. But then he also improved a little bit in like the 10 plus range, where it was like 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. So like he is showing some improvement over the middle. So I'll give him credit for that. But the trend still remains consistent. As you can see, he's not great over the middle. But the problem that I saw last year is it seemed like in general he was more erratic. Like you said, you brought up the turnover thing, and he's always been really good when it comes to the sideline. But like, look at the top right, outside right, 20 plus yards downfield on the right side of the field, 1 touchdown, 4 picks, a terrible QB rating, like, 10 of 31 total, attempts there. So he's throwing it out of all the deep areas of the field. That's where he's throwing it the most, and yet he was by far the worst there. I don't know if that was like Devonta Smith or AJ Brown on those kind of routes, on those spots. I don't know what's going on there, but he had some struggles deep down the sideline on the right side. And then on the left sideline, didn't have as many struggles, but wasn't as productive if you see on the 0 to 10 yard, plus range, anywhere from like 0 to 19 yards, wasn't as productive in terms of like being able to make plays on that sideline either. So it was just a really weird season for Jalen Hurts. Where he had like these crazy highs going from, I think he had his career high in terms of touchdowns and big time throws and passing yards. Like I think all of those were career highs for him this season. But he also set a career high in interceptions, in lost fumbles. So his stat increases in certain spots came at the cost of what he used to be renowned for, which was his safety. So that's why he's at 10 for me. You saw earlier, he actually wasn't inside of my top 10. I've been debating on it pretty much throughout the day who I was going to put at 10. The guy who I just left off was Trevor Lawrence. The reason I put Hurts over him, despite the fact that last year I actually had Trevor Lawrence higher than Jalen Hurts, is simply because I do think that Jalen Hurts' rushing upside was still like a pretty big difference maker, despite all the issues that I mentioned. I'm pretty sure this was his 3rd consecutive season of having double-digit rushing touchdowns. He, I believe, led all quarterbacks in rushing first downs. So he was a key difference maker with his legs, whereas last year, both him and Trevor Lawrence had the turnover problems. I don't think that Lawrence was able to overcome that with, the rushing upside that Jalen Hurts does have. So Jalen Hurts is number 10 for me. Like I said, I almost put him outside the top 10, but the rushing is kind of what kept him in there. And if he can get back to the conservative, like not all the turnover problems, and kind of fix some of the sideline throwing issues, because like I said, he is somewhat improving over the middle. And if he does lower the turnovers, I assume that's also going to lower some of those turnovers in the middle of the field, where he did throw 8 of his total interceptions there. If he can just fix some of those issues, then who knows how high this guy can go, because he does have a lot of things to like. But he's at number 10 for me. At number 9, I have Matthew Stafford. I think I had him at number 10 last year. He had a great season. I have no complaints about Matthew Stafford. Just a really good veteran quarterback. Last year, I don't think that he had like an insane season, and he did, I think, miss a couple games in the middle of the year. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he miss like 2 or 3?
I believe so. Sorry.
I don't know. I could be wrong on that, but for some reason I feel like I think it was against the Cowboys that he got hurt.
Maybe he got hurt in a game. It shows he played 17 games.
Okay,
during the
maybe.
regular season. So maybe he got hurt.
Or maybe I'm thinking about the year before. I don't know. Anyway, he had a really good year last year, and that was without Cooper Kupp being like the guy that he was in previous seasons. He was still solid, but Puka Nacua really showed out and became that guy. And overall, Stafford, it just seems like, is able to consistently be the quarterback that you want him to be. And I think that even last year, he didn't necessarily have the, because we talked about it even like the year they won the Super Bowl, right? Stafford kind of would at sometimes have those moments where it was just like, man, what are you doing? Why are you making that throw? Why are we turning the ball over here late in the fourth quarter when we need to be leading, just a simple drive to waste clock here? Stuff like that. I don't think that last year he really had those moments. It seemed like last year he'd largely cleaned that up. He only had 2.1% turnover worthy plays, which was second in all quarterback play, only behind Dak Prescott in that regard last year. So, he had a really solid season. Matthew Stafford, one of the best in the league for a reason. At number 8, I have Aaron Rodgers, and it's tough to really talk about him because he played like 5 snaps last year. So I don't really know what to say about him outside of the fact that I've had Aaron Rodgers ranked inside my top 10 for quite a long time. I've had him slowly dropping heading into last year. I think I had him ranked number 6 or 7. Now he's at number 8. I just want to see a full season of Aaron Rodgers with the Jets. I think that he's going to keep being Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if he'll be, MVP back-to-back Aaron Rodgers that he was in 2020, 2021. But I still think that he's a top 10 quarterback, and I'm of the belief that I will keep him in there until he proves to me that he is not. My one concern is obviously he's coming off an Achilles injury, and he is 39? How old is he? Yeah, 39, 40. So he's not young by any means, and I worry that the Achilles injury will all but strip him of the mobility that he did have. Rodgers was never a Jalen Hurts in terms of mobility, but he could move, and it was a weapon because he could extend the plays, whether it was him actually running and picking up some crucial yardage on a third down or whatever, or just simply being able to run around in the pocket and wait until somebody gets open and then make one of those Aaron Rodgers crazy throws that everybody became accustomed to seeing. His mobility was a weapon, and I don't know if he'll have that. So that's my biggest concern for Aaron Rodgers going into this year. But like I said, I still have him inside the top 5 until he proves to me otherwise. At number 7, I have CJ Stroud from the Houston Texans. And if anybody has listened to our rankings throughout the years, this will be surprising to you because I'm historically very much a I need to see more kind of guy when it comes to rookies. I don't often rate rookies very highly, but I mean, you knew this because we both had CJ Stroud number 1, but I've been talking about CJ Stroud for a long time. And I've been a big CJ Stroud believer since before he got drafted. And so I've seen this guy play throughout his career at Ohio State. I've seen him do it. And him doing what he did with the Texans was simply confirmation or even blowing my expectations out of the water because of what seemed to be a pretty lackluster wide receiver room. All of a sudden, it's Nico Collins is going for 1,400 yards. Tank Dell was looking like a true difference maker, which I will say he was a rookie last year, so we didn't really know what to expect. But that wide receiver room did not look like it was at all lackluster when you had CJ Stroud under center. So CJ Stroud, a true difference maker. I think he's the one guy on here that's not going to be in my top 5 that I think has the capability to be in the top 5 next year. The rest of them, I guess Aaron Rodgers could if he was to get, if he's playing at that MVP level form that we saw him at, but I just don't know if he'll reach that again. But yeah, I could see CJ Stroud next year being even higher than he is currently number 7. And then at number 6, I have the same guy you had, which is Dak Prescott, Dallas Cowboys. Fantastic season last year, second in MVP voting. Looked like he could maybe even win the MVP, but Lamar at the end of the year kind of took it from him. And Dak, I think it was the game against the Niners. There was some game, no, because the Niners game I think was earlier in the year. There was just games where he didn't really put his stamp on it like Lamar did at the end of the season to truly say you're the best player in the league that year. But he had a really, really good season, one of the best years of his entire career, if not the best year of his entire career. So Dak was absolutely fantastic last year. It's unfortunate what happened in the playoffs because everybody, is going to remember that as opposed to the incredible season he did have. But in terms of the full body of work, Dak is at number 6 for me on the outside looking in. It feels like I don't know a name to compare him to, but but it feels like he's kind of like the ultimate gatekeeper at this point in his career. Like if you're better than Dak, to me, you're elite. And if you're as good or worse than Dak, you're kind of not. Like he feels like whatever the line is, he's right below it, if that makes sense. So he's at number 6 for me.
Yeah. All right. So some similarities, a couple differences. Obviously, we'll go over all of them when they're both done. But yeah, interesting. We both have Dak at 6. All right. So let me get into my top 5 before John does, but mine first. So at 5, following Dak Prescott, I have him at 6 as well, is I have Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, once again, for him, we know he can make all the throws, one of the best at reading defenses, deciphering them, and just being quick with decision making. That's why he survived for as long as he has, even though he's still gotten nicked up, which is really one of the only reasons why he's fallen, is obviously staying healthy. And, you could say, in my opinion, that's as the key reason as to why they've gone off to a couple of these slow starts in the past few years. Is it always seems to be like last year it was like the hamstring, or I forget the calf. It was like some sort of that leg injury. He just wasn't moving and driving off the right way. And then obviously there's the other injuries before. So in theory, he, once again, this is all preseason talk, but he's obviously, reports are he's been putting heavy emphasis into, building up the lower body, making sure maybe he can withstand some of the abuse that he takes. And hopefully that O-line is better than it was last year. But nonetheless, regards to Burrow, I mean, still, he's a lot like you mentioned Aaron Rodgers, where, but more so in regards to he's not going to tuck the ball and run, but his mobility within the pocket is severely underrated in terms of buying time, just manipulating the edge rushers and trying to help his O-line out at times. He's very good, has that great sixth sense within the pocket to just keep plays alive, and like I said, can make almost any throw. Obviously, one weakness, if I had to critique in terms of the guys ahead of him, arm strength, not the strongest arm, but hey, maybe if he's working out and such, maybe that'll continue to be a strength. And honestly, he's only gotten better at that as the years have gone on since he's come in the league. So it's obviously a weakness that he knows about and he's been trying to get better with, and hopefully also getting a better O-line will maybe be able to showcase that a little more often. But nonetheless, he could easily rise further up these rankings as well. But for now, I have him at number 5 on mine. At number 4 is where I put Matthew Stafford. I mean, it's a little bit like what I mentioned with Burrow, especially with the arm talent, but more, as we know, with Stafford. And kudos to CJ Stroud for, I forget what podcast he was giving, Stafford his flowers about all the different arm angles. And even Rodgers earlier in his career, I remember the first year Mahomes starting, everyone was, clamoring about the no-look passes. And Rodgers like, well, Stafford was one of the original no-look guys that was doing that. And obviously we know that because of the Super Bowl as well. But it was good to see him put in a full bill of health last year. And like you mentioned, without Cooper Kupp, was still able to orchestrate the offense and even missed Kyron Williams at times. And, this team, especially offensively, was like trying to find their way and their identity. And nonetheless, Stafford was still delivering. I mean, even in some of the losses, people forget, like, tough loss was against the Ravens, but they only lost because of special teams. And, he was going back and forth, and that was a very good Ravens defense. They were one of the few teams that were able to dissect that. And, yeah, I mean, Stafford, with his experience and his talent, which may not be fully what it once was, but still a damn good arm. And, like I said, could throw from different angles, different platforms, and he is extremely nuanced, of course, in knowing the appropriate ball to throw. It's one of the reasons why, as great a season he has, I'm not trying to take it away from him, but, Puka Nacua was able to have a great season, too, as it helps when you have a quarterback that's maximizing everything that you can, do every route, on every play. So, hopefully you can just stay healthy for Stafford, and and if we can get a little bit more from Cooper Kupp and/or the offense and defense this year, I mean, he can definitely be in position to continue to wow us as he has really since he's been at LA and playing. So, I have him at number 4. At number 3 is going to be slightly maybe controversial, but that's where I have the MVP, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, we know how dynamic he is in terms of running, and I know there's still a bit of criticism for some, but I like what he did in terms of passing last year. Starting to see, had an offense that was a little more complex and nuanced in passing scheme and style, and got him some easy throws and such. And had also dealt. And that was in the year which Mark Andrews was out for a little bit, and it took some time for Zay Flowers to get going. But nonetheless, Lamar kept the offense going with his legs or his arm. And like you mentioned, especially towards the end of the season, they really started to find their stride. And despite playing a very poor game, they were in it with the Kansas City Chiefs at the conference championship. Just, a few plays go a different way, it could all be very much different. So nonetheless, Lamar Jackson's at number 3 for me. And the only reason he is because really this top 3, this is like for me, it's like the unicorn tier. You mentioned like how Dak's like the gatekeeper. From these top 3 for right now, for me, there's like these are like true unicorns. Put them in any offense, you're probably going to make the playoffs unless you're doing something, something goes really wrong. But so the second quarterback on my top 10 is my boy Josh Allen out of Buffalo. I mean, we know he's still got a rocket arm. It's still running around like a chicken with his head cut off and scary in the mobility game. I think we saw last year. We saw like the good and bad. It was obviously the bad at the beginning, as you remember. A lot of just unforced errors, being overly aggressive, trying to compensate too much at times, and then putting his team further in the 8 ball. But he adjusted as well as the offense did throughout the year. It was able to be more patient and conservative, and be more willing to wait for the open play, then capitalize on that. Just unfortunate that they kind of found their stride too late in the season. And, we'll see if maybe this year will be a little bit different, but they can keep building off that success. Obviously changing OCs within the middle of the year never helps as well. But the reason I have him over Lamar is just, honestly, I trust Josh a little bit more in terms of a drop back passer. And once again, this is nitpicking, but I just trust him more in regards to, being constantly delivering in that aspect. And, as great as Lamar is, Josh Allen's not that far behind him in terms of mobility. It's just, his offense doesn't use it as much within. It's more just off script for Josh and his rushing plays. But anyhow, last but not least, my number 1 is Mr. Patrick Mahomes. I know statistically last year was a tough year, but nonetheless, kind of like with Josh Allen, he had to reconfigure and be a little bit more conservative, especially after that Christmas nightmare game against the Raiders. We saw he from there on out he was willing to kind of be patient, be a game manager at times, and then when the iron strike or the opportunity was hot, he knew he had a one-on-one or it was an opportune moment to strike. He did so, and you still see everything, all the arm angles and such, and that was with once again the limited receiving cores they had, and once again the limited kind of passing they did because they changed their identity, not really because of him, but because they had to. Like we mentioned in their breakdown, that not a lot, wide receiver talent was not a plenty last year or consistent very much, as we know with the drops and such that they dealt with. So, there's a reason he's the Magic Man. Most consistent in regards to everybody, in regards to making throws at all 3 levels and the arm angles. And, even though he's got that little duck walk, we know he's great at extending plays and keeping them alive or just tucking and running. So, we'll see if that offense can get back to high flying like they've all been saying this offseason. But nonetheless, I got Patrick Mahomes at number 1 for my top 10 quarterback rankings. So, all right, I'm going to throw it to you now, John. What are your top 5 quarterbacks?
All right, 4 and 5. I have 2 guys that I think are just tied personally. Like, I don't care who people put them at 4 and 5. I really just feel like they're kind of the same in terms of the spot I put them, which is Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. If somebody else wants to put 1 4, the other one 5, I don't care. I think they're just kind of both the same. So yeah, I think they're both there for different reasons. Justin Herbert, it's the pure arm talent, it's the mobility, which is incredibly underrated, but he can definitely move. Like all the kind of physical attributes, the gifts, he's got them. Joe Burrow, in terms of just the mental side of football, the swagger, everything about Joe Burrow, the decision making, he's right there. I think they're incredibly different quarterbacks. Herbert can make throws that Joe Burrow can't. So, if you put gun to my head and you said pick up 4 and a 5, I'd probably go Herbert over Burrow. But realistically, like I said, I'm not too pressed about who is where. I think they're both they're both basically right there. So I have them listed technically as tied at number 4, which is Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. Both are studs. And I think both are like really one kind of key season away from MVP level play, challenging Mahomes for the Super Bowl spot, which, we saw Burrow has beaten Mahomes in the past and it was able to go to the Super Bowl. But yeah, I think they're kind of one season away from being the guy, right? So yeah, they're both at 4 for me, or 4 or 5. At number 3, like you said, I agree with what you mentioned, which is the top 3 are kind of like, it's like the top 3 for me. There's like the tiers. There's the top 3, then there's that 4 or 5 spot with those 2, and then there's the rest of the top 10. So I agree with the top 3. There's kind of a gap at like between those 2 guys and the next 3, specifically because I think the next 3 have already proven throughout their career that it doesn't realistically matter what happens in terms of some of the stuff around them. They will still be elite no matter what. Offensive line injuries, not a problem. Literally some of the worst offensive line play in the league when it came to that one Super Bowl for Mahomes, or Lamar's offensive line can't stay healthy, or most fans probably can't even name an offensive lineman on the Bills. Doesn't matter, right? Like, guys are still elite. Big time receivers. We people used to say, "Oh, Stephon Diggs carries Josh Allen." Well, Stephon Diggs is gone now, and it's probably not going to matter. Lamar Jackson has never really had an elite receiver room. Doesn't really matter. Tyreek Hill leaves. Doesn't really matter for Mahomes. So those 3 are my top 3. But in terms of the actual order, at number 3, I'm going with the same guy you had, which is Lamar Jackson. And I'm going to talk about him in reference to number 2, which is Josh Allen. The reason that ultimately I have Allen a little bit above Lamar is I agree with what you said. I don't think that in terms of mobility and production on the ground, there's actually as big of a gap between the 2 as people think. I think that obviously it looks a little different. Lamar is very much more highlight oriented in the way that he can carry his team on the ground. But in terms of the arm talent gap, I do think that Allen can make any throw that he wants on the field, where Lamar is a little more limited in that he there's just certain throws that are not going to be available to him. That's not a shot at Lamar by any means, because obviously there is still a gap between them in terms of mobility. Lamar is still a better running quarterback. He does still produce more on the ground. But I just think in terms of the complete package, Josh Allen is a little closer to it than Lamar is. We're nitpicking here. We're picking at hairs because, like I said, I think the top 3, there is a gap between them and everybody else. So that's just the reasoning as to why I have Josh Allen above Lamar in that top 3. And then at number 1, doesn't really need any explanation. It's Patrick Mahomes. He's the best quarterback in the NFL, and it's as simple as that. So just to recap, at number 10 for me, Jalen Hurts. At number 9, Matthew Stafford. At number 8, Aaron Rodgers. Number 7, CJ Stroud. Number 6, Dak Prescott. Number 5 and 4 was tied with Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. Number 3 was Lamar. Number 2 was Josh Allen. And number 1 was Patrick Mahomes.
Gotcha. And mine, I'll go reverse. 1, Mahomes. 2, Allen. 3, Lamar Jackson. 4, Matthew Stafford. 5, Joe Burrow. 6, Dak Prescott. 7, Justin Herbert. 8, CJ Stroud. And 9, Jalen Hurts. And at 10, Jared Goff. So I guess in regards to critiquing, you put Rodgers in your top 10. I'm gonna go ahead and just get ahead of it because I know I'm sure maybe it's a question on your mind. I don't have Rodgers in my top 10. I didn't have him in my top 10 last year either. And I mean, once again, I think my concerns as to why he wasn't in last year and mine are still relevant. As I mentioned, I'll reiterate them. Excuse me. I'm concerned about Rodgers' aggressiveness at the end of the Green Bay stint. It was very conservative from Rodgers. Yes, he showed off the quick release and such, but never did he really force the issue or make plays down the field unless there were wide open or it was Devontae Adams one-on-one. So that's a concern, especially with that Jets O-line. And I mean, you already kind of alluded to it, but his mobility has started kind of going down in recent years. He still has ability to buy time within the pocket and such, but especially outside the pocket, not as much in terms of getting away from guys. Obviously, you can still make crazy throws and arm angles and such, but just didn't get to see that as much. And then obviously coming off the Achilles, that's why I have him outside my top 10. But he's right on that cusp on the outside. And I mean, you put him at 8, I definitely see why. I definitely see him maybe having a redemption year. Maybe literally most of his career has been trying to prove people wrong and such. So I could see him bouncing back with the Jets here, and especially if he gets to the playoffs, I could definitely see he Aaron Rodgers being the main reason why, just given that stability on offense that we haven't seen, Jets fans haven't seen who knows how long. So that's why Aaron did not make my top 10. But anything on I know I had Jared Goff. I'm guessing Goff would be off your list as well, probably in the 10 to 15 range.
Yeah, he's in that range. Like I said, for me, the guy who I first left off was Trevor Lawrence, so he would be at 11 for me if we were going to continue the ranking there. Ultimately, I think that Goff had a great season. I just think there's a lot of different factors that determine how Goff performs, whether that be the weather, whether that be if they're inside or outside, like for the stadium, if it's a dome or not, whether that be the state of his roster. I think that comparable to a lot of other quarterbacks, Jared Goff has a far better surrounding cast in terms of the running backs, Laporta, the receiver room with a true alpha receiver like an Amon St. Brown, arguably the best offensive line in the league, like all these kind of factors. And I know it's something that some fans hate to hear, but it does factor in for me because I'm very much. You can't apply it to like every quarterback, right? But I'm very much of the belief that you could sub out Jared Goff and put in a multitude of quarterbacks that would do the same, if not better, based on the surrounding things. Not every quarterback could do the same. Like I don't think you put Daniel Jones in that offense and the same results happen. But yeah, that's kind of how I feel about Jared Goff. He's in the 11 to 15 range, or sorry, the 12 to 15 range for me. But yeah, that's why I left him out.
Yeah, Kyler and Trevor Lawrence were tough for me to leave out. Obviously, Kyler, it wasn't terrible at the end of last year, but obviously we got to see a full year of it really for him. For my opinion, that's why I left him off. And then Trevor last year was tough. He's definitely on the outside looking in for me too. He was one I heavily considered, but it's just last year was tough, up and down very much. So I feel like that was supposed to be the year. We'll see with this year. Maybe with some different guys around him, and maybe another year he'll be better within the Doug Peterson system. So, and then only other name I maybe would have thrown in, I'm trying to think. I didn't do more, but I guess we're hoping to see Deshaun Watson. We'll talk about the Browns in another episode, but guys like him, he's another one that has the talent to be in the top 10. We've literally seen it with him before. It's just a matter of getting back into that conversation, and obviously easier said than done. But I think he's the only other one I think I would throw in there. And obviously maybe one of these rookies. Who knows? It's really I really doubt it though, because it's so hard. With Stroud and the Houston's, how low the expectations really were too. I think that does play into it. Because we all had low expectations really. Well, it feels like for the Bears, there's still high expectation for the Bears because also they didn't technically they didn't technically lose to get to the first round, that number one overall pick.
Right.
Too. I think that's an important factor. Like they already have a pretty good roster. We've seen them been assembling it the past few years, and I mean they were in the playoff conversation the last few weeks as well.
Yeah.
So of the regular season. So I think that's important to factor in. But I mean we'll see. Maybe Caleb Williams is as advertised, but I think maybe Jayden Daniels. Once again, I think those two guys probably will see them here in about 2 years as opposed to next year, but who knows? Anyone else maybe you want to throw on the LOI?
No, I mean the only other option that I really would have considered, like you said, was Kyler Murray, because I do feel like he's a true difference maker, but yeah, just wasn't quite in the cut, which I think was the same thing that happened last year. Wasn't quite there, which is unfortunate for Kyler because I do think some of it is surroundings, but you add Marvin Harrison Jr., you got a little more stability at coach. So we'll see what happens this year.
Sorry, and one quarterback I want to throw in too because I know we're going to get questions about it is Tua, but Tua's like a lesser Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff is of the talent of Tua, but I think Goff is better off schedule and out of the pocket. I think Tua is certainly in for me around that 12 to 15 range, like maybe 15. I don't know exactly, but you know what I mean. He's in that conversation for me at least. I'm not saying he's far off, but those are things. People are going to bring up his numbers because he had really good numbers last year. He was and such, but I'm not. I'm not sure if you wanted to add to that. And also, sorry, same with Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's like going to be in that same conversation.
See, honestly, I didn't really ever consider Tua. I would have been more likely, and once again, you know how I feel about when it's only 1 year. I'm more likely to consider a guy like Jordan Love personally, because Tua, to me, it feels like I know what he is. I know what his weaknesses are. He can have a great team around him. But I think the biggest thing is that his issue is I feel like he's really good when things are going according to plan, which is to get the ball out of his hands as quickly as humanly possible, partially because maybe their offensive line's not great, but also partially because I don't think that when he has to truly go through all of his reads and he's got to deal with the pressure and he's got to, try and, all that kind of stuff, when he's got to like kind of work through the play, I just don't think that he's that great. But when he's able to hit his first read or his second read and just go as things are according to plan, I think he's good. Like, he can execute the offense, and that's what we see in Miami. To where, like I said, I would be more willing to talk about a guy like Jordan Love, Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence. I would even in the sort of game manager tiers, I would take Jared Goff over him. I would take Brock Purdy over him. And you know how I feel about Brock Purdy. I think Brock Purdy is the most arguably carried quarterback in the NFL in terms of his surrounding cast and coaching staff. I would take Kirk Cousins over Tua personally. And these are not digs at Tua by any means. This is just, I think that some of the other guys named, I feel more confident having them as my QB if things are not going according to plan. So, yeah, I mean, Tua's a good quarterback. Do not get me wrong. He can execute the offense. I think that, this used to be a thing that a lot of people said. But remember, like, when people would use the argument of, like, he's good enough to win a Super Bowl, he's not good enough to win a Super Bowl. I think that we've seen with Nick Foles and the Eagles that, like, that kind of whole thing is a little ridiculous of a statement. I think Tua is good enough to be a quarterback on a team that wins a Super Bowl. I think he is. The issue is that now he's getting paid like a top quarterback. So, how does it work now that he's getting the huge contract? That I don't know. And that's what holds him back for me. Like I said, where I would take a Trevor Lawrence or a Kyler or a Jordan Love, because I think they're more capable of overcoming some of the deficiencies that are created by the fact that they get paid so much.
Agreed. Yeah. And thank you for throwing out Jordan Love. Obviously, as a Packer fan, optimistically, I would love for him to be in this top 10 or in the conversation, because, obviously the way he ended last year was really good. We'll see if he can build off of that.
If he does what he did in the second half of last year, all of next year, he's in the conversation, in my opinion. The only reason I did not include him was, once again, the argument of I need to see more. And I still remember the beginning of last season when he was kind of atrocious. And then at some point along the way, he figured it out. Like, you got to play the game. Like, you got to practice in preseason is only going to get you so far. So I do cut him some slack. Like, he needed to get some actual game time. And in the second half, he was phenomenal. So if he does what he did in the second half the whole year, like I said, I think he's in the conversation.
Yeah. So we'll see how it all shakes out according to last year. I do, like I said, not much changes for me in regards to last year. Only guys that were in it that are not are Trevor Lawrence and Kyler Murray, which we kind of mentioned why for me. I don't have
mine. The only difference is Trevor Lawrence is out, CJ Stroud is in. Otherwise, the entire top 10 is largely the same. The order has shifted a little bit. Lamar's probably my biggest jumper, going from 7 all the way up to 3. Herbert, Burrow go down a little bit. Rodgers goes down a little bit. Hurts went down 1 spot. Stafford went up 1 spot. The biggest thing was I had Trevor Lawrence at 5 last year, which was probably a little preemptive. I was probably jumping the gun there. A little bit of potential bias that I was putting into that one. So him not being in my top 10 at all, it was a little tough to leave him out.
That's tough, but he did. To be fair, like you said, it was a lot of building up on that previous season. But we'll see. Could be the year he maybe helps you out and gets back into that top 5 convo. But that'll do it for John and myself. Those are top 10 quarterback rankings for the 2024, heading into the 2024-2025 season. Obviously, it will change, and we'll do this again next year. And